Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to WeatherBrains episode number 648. This is the pre-show. This is being recorded on Thursday, June 14th. It's a Thursday night special because we're just got nothing better to do than to do a Thursday night special. Bill Murray is live from the Hampton Inn in Walla Walla, Washington.
No, this actually is our hotel office right here, believe it or not.
Ooh, let's read some of the writing behind Bill.
Let's see if there's anything sensitive up there.
Hampton, Selma. What is that, Alexa?
Where do you see that? I don't even see that.
It's over there on the left.
What do those three letters stand for?
Alexandria, Louisiana.
Very good. Very good. I think I just divided all
back here.
Whatever, but I don't know. Yeah, let's see. Oh yeah, you got numbers over here. Yeah, you've got what did you see first? Meridian, Mobile, Clinton,
Conroe, Buffalo,
Conroe. What am I looking at?
Richland, Katy, Alpine, Hampton, Selma, HIX, Selma.
Very good, James. You have good eyes. Or I have a good camera or something.
Both.
I hope we have some guests tonight.
Hey, if we don't, it's me and you, pal. We're taking this show to the top.
All right, let's do it.
So I was doing the weather downtown Birmingham live at the professional baseball park here. And naturally, the live shot didn't work. And they can't use live views for weather. There's a latency and the weather graphics don't match what your words are. So we just can't use a live view. So had to drive back to the station. Had to drive back in 445 traffic. That was a hoot down I-65. Haven't done that in a long time. I needed one. That was special. But, I made it back at 5:01. So
you did not. You made it back in 16 minutes?
I drove slightly illegally, but I made it back. You got to do what you got to do sometimes. No, but for those that are watching, and thank you for watching, which we have not even put this on the tweeter. We have some people watching. I am off next week, and we have not missed a show in 12 years. We started this show in 2006, and we will get a show out next week. So the podcast version of this will be released Monday, June 18th, late Monday night, as we typically would do. But Bill, I'm going to Denver, Colorado. Hello, Kim. Kim is joining us. Good to have you.
Thanks. How are you guys doing this evening?
Crazy.
Good.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to Denver. Oddly enough, in my old age, most people my age have been most larger cities in the country, and I have never been to Denver, which makes no sense. But I will be there for a few days, and we're going to Coors Field. So let's see if you two know the one delicacy they serve at Coors Field, the only major league ballpark in America that serves this one item.
Rocky Mountain oysters.
Bingo!
I had them on, after the Durango Silverton train goes, I guess it goes to Silverton. And so there was a place there that was famous for those. And, I was all, like, I got to come home with things to make James grossed out. That's what I do. It's like the Geico commercials, that's what you do. And I ate those things and I just could not. I had about two of them and that was like, this is just not for me.
Yeah, there's Kim, there's just some things you stay away from. And
that's it.
The name of the vendor is Best Balls, and
oh, nice, yeah. Well, they're the right place to have a product with that name.
And as Kevin would say, that would be the show title, but because this is the pre-show, you can't use it. So, for those that don't know,
somehow
in the pre-show, we share boring personal stories, which is what this is, and humorous anecdotes, and say outrageous things, which is what this is. So. And if you don't know what a Rocky Mountain oyster is, go get on the Google and just enjoy for yourself.
But wasn't our last show, you, me, and Kim? pretty much.
And
Kevin.
Kevin, we had Kevin.
Yeah,
and
Kevin was there the whole time.
It might just be a repeat. Just
That's
get
okay.
Kevin.
part
We have
2.
3 other guests. Surely one of them will show up.
Hey, we'll make this thing fly.
Was Brian around this evening, or is he out too?
He's still out in a boat somewhere.
Okay.
On a cruise, allegedly in the Gulf. In fact, I could have used him here. Typically, Kim, when I do a weather segment away from the station, Brian backs me up in the studio in case something happens.
Oh.
So he's not here, and naturally something happens. So I had to drive back in horrific traffic in the middle of afternoon drive time, but that's okay. You know, stuff happens. It just happens. It's June. It's almost time to take a week off. Yeah,
it's going to be
just
wonderful.
glad to be here.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. You know, it's I would say the hardest grind for me is the grind from the 1st of January through the middle of June through right now. Doing, many days I'm doing 2 school programs a day. So I'm up before 5. You do the morning production at home. I do TV at home. I go speak sometimes. And, some cases I'll drive 4 hours on the road doing these school programs. And then I come back up here, work 1 to 11. And there's just not much opportunity for downtime. So I am
next
always
week Nirvana though.
Right? Are you going to sleep? Are you going to sleep more than 3 or 4 hours a night on vacation? What do you do on vacation?
Other than going to get Rocky Mountain oysters, preferably as little as possible. No, we go to a random ballpark every year. So this is the random ballpark. What's so sad, though, I was going, I think I've shared this boring story before. We were going to see a friend who plays for the Rockies. It's always nice to have a connection at these random ballparks. And he was going to get us in to watch batting practice and, have a good time. And literally the next day after I sent him a note and set up the date and everything, he broke his foot. He fouled a ball off his foot, broke 2 bones. And so he is on the DL and he is rehabbing in Arizona. So he won't even be there. But
I was going to say, James, if he does a rehab stint, maybe you should have to go to the ballpark that he's rehabbing in. So like, what would it be, like Prescott, Arizona or something?
Yes, something like that. It's, one of the minor league teams down there. And that wouldn't
James,
be bad.
How many major league parks have you been to since you've been doing this for a while?
Probably not as many as you. I'd say we've done.
I have 9 to go.
We probably have about 10 to 12 to go. I need to do an audit. It was strange. Just down the road here, they built a new ballpark in Atlanta. We haven't even been to that one.
We haven't even worn the old one out yet.
No.
I love going to Turner Field because, it was on the west side of town. You get in and get out easy. Now it's going to be a nightmare going up there. Up I 75 and 85 or wherever you have to go. I haven't even been yet. After 2 years. Braves are doing good. Won again last night, 2-0. Oh, here's Steve Subert. Here's my weekly look of having gas. I'll be right back.
Yeah. For those that don't know, watch Bill's face really carefully. It's something like right now. He has that look of gas pain, like lower GI distress or something. So
it's a real benefit for those who can catch our show with the video feed.
Yeah, exactly. And for those that don't know, the higher the IQ of the guest, the higher odds we can't get them on the show. They can't figure out the Hangouts, the Google Hangouts. So, but I will say, Kim, that this was so much easier back in the old audio only days where we just worried about, Skype and audio. But
did the Skype work better than this does, or with a few less bugs?
It's just not as complicated because when we're doing this show, you have to worry about your video and your audio. And when you're just worried about audio, that is so much nicer. It doesn't take as much bandwidth. You can be anywhere and get on the show and it wouldn't sound that bad.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
But the video thing just makes it more complex, but it is what it is. And for those that were watching, obviously we're using Google Hangouts, and I think that's probably still the right thing to do. YouTube has its
official drink.
Yeah, YouTube has its own culture. There's a total subculture over there of YouTubers, and they live there. And in fact, I question why we don't stream our tornado coverage over there, because the younger demographics that are YouTubers certainly don't use Facebook. That is just foreign to them. They wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. But anyway, being over on YouTube has its advantages. But we're not going to talk about social media because Kevin's poor old head just might explode.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed, was it 2 weeks ago? Y'all, when there was no guest, y'all went into that pretty deep. I was really sorry I was not here.
Yeah, we missed you too. We missed you too.
Oh, man.
I wish I could remember some of the questions that popped up in my mind about that discussion the other day, but I'd have to go back and watch the show again.
How about that? I guess maybe we ought to talk about it on this show. The Alabama Emergency Management Agency, former director, promoting staying in a mobile home during a tornado.
Yeah, what were your feelings on that?
I was, quite frankly, outraged, and I had to count to 10 because, I can sick the dogs on people if I want to. I mean, I can sick the dogs on people in a hurry. But for some reason, after counting to 10, I felt it would be best not to do that. And let's just see where this thing goes. But goodness, Kim, how many people watch that video we made?
Within one day, it had 125,000 views. And the last time I checked it a couple of days ago, it was 150,000. I mean, that's a lot. That is a lot of people.
You know what? That brings up an interesting question. Why, you said, what was the number in 24 hours again?
125,000.
Why did that happen? Was there promotion of it?
It was on their Facebook page, and I don't know otherwise.
And it was see, sometimes I wonder why.
I guess you can hear me.
It goes back to the experiment question. Is somebody experimenting somewhere and counting? Because there just seems to be no reason to me in 24 hours that there's this viral rush to a commercial, a fairly non-substantive commercial.
Right.
For the manufactured or mobile home industry. I just don't understand that.
I wasn't sure. I agree with you. I'm not sure what caused it. And sometimes things get views because they're provocative, and people who don't like it are the ones who are sharing it, kind of like I sent it along to the whole WeatherBrains crew and had you guys watch if you hadn't seen it already. And so for all we know, it could be that a majority of those people saw it and went, oh my gosh, what is this? And
that just doesn't seem likely to me. It's that this is where I'm pushing on the platforms, right? Facebook can decide in a moment's notice if they want to do an experiment or a test or whatever, and push something out to people. The canonical example was that when your page disappeared a couple of years ago, remember, James?
Oh yeah,
went on Leo's show, and I still just steam about that. Because there was some experiment going on there. There's no question. There's no question that was an experiment.
And we'll never know what it was. But I agree. It's odd that a video from the Mobile Home Manufacturing Association,
right?
Because I was that many views.
Yeah, I was reading something this morning or yesterday. I guess it was this morning. You remember there was that Facebook experiment where there was about 750,000 people. The mood experiment. Do you know about this one, Kim?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But see, you look at Facebook and you go, well, okay, so we caught that one for whatever reason. I don't remember, but we know about that one. But it seems pretty unlikely that that's the only experiment that they were running. They just got caught on. That's their whole history. They're doing all kinds of things. And then when they get caught on something, Cambridge Analytica or whatever it is, they go, oh, sorry.
Well, do you think that this was like an experiment of some kind, or could it just have been that the Alabama Manufactured Housing Association paid a good bit to Facebook to promote that particular video? Because that's something I think that they're very interested in trying to deflate the idea that their structures are unsafe. And I think that they're trying to break new ground in new markets, and so they're very motivated.
Yeah, you came to it through Facebook?
Yes.
Okay, well then
Yes.
that does suggest. I didn't know that. That does suggest then that they paid for it at some level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so is that a smaller version of these continued violations that they're doing right now? What's her name? Sheryl Sandberg, and I can't remember the other guy's name. There's a conference every year put on by Recode Media, Kara Swisher and her people, and I'm just now listening to Cheryl and this other guy's appearance on that show, and it just infuriates me because they're playing this wounded party in the Cambridge Analytica thing. Well, we had our policies in place and they didn't follow the rules, and yeah, we didn't catch it. We're sorry, but that's not the foundation issue. The foundation issue is really the news feed, because they're artificially manipulating time and space by algorithmically adjusting your feed, and that's not right. They shouldn't be able to get away with that because, okay, they claim it's an algorithm and it's not human generated, but those things are built by people, and so there's an artificial influence on what you see, and they can manipulate that at any time, and that's the real issue. Around I think it was before Cambridge Analytica, maybe when this stuff started bubbling up right around the time, but there was some other privacy issue, and you got to go in and see all the things, well, not all the things, whatever they decided they were going to show you about your profile. And I remember very vividly looking at mine, and in big, as I recall, in big bold letters at the top, it made assumptions about me. I like photography and I like weather and all of those things. Okay, so that's pretty obvious. And you say, okay, well, who cares? But very prominently featured in my profile was that I was a Republican. Now, I would say I lean toward Republican, but I've never told Facebook in any way, shape, or form that I'm a Republican, and I don't post political things on my feed. But they made that assumption, and during the time of the election, it was important to them to be able to identify Republican versus Democrat, because that was important to people wanting to know those things. But they made an assumption somewhere, and that's wrong. It's wrong, and it should be illegal.
They definitely were making that assumption, but I'm really surprised to hear that they attached that to your profile.
Yeah,
because that's right. I hadn't heard that making that leap.
No. But see, this is my other point on extended on this, is that it's a huge issue, because what they showed me on the profile is the tiny little sliver. There's what's referred to as a dark profile, the thing that you can't see. They'll claim, oh, it's too complicated, we can't show you, or they're not, whatever it is. But there's a dark profile that goes on in there, and this Republican thing proves it, because they're doing stuff in the background to make assumptions about you, so that they can then go, look at the thing that just came out the other day. Why do they need to know? They're collecting data on what your battery status was on your phone. Did you see this other day? The stuff that they gathered from the phone manufacturers, there's a whole list of other things that go into your profile. And one of the things, which seems ridiculous, but for some reason they seem to think they had access to it and they kept it, was what the status was on my battery level. And they make assumptions. Yes, they make assumptions based on that, and they make assumptions about the mood that you're in if you're up in the middle of the night. This has been shown in research. You're up in the middle of the night, you're killing a few minutes because you can't sleep, but they make assumptions. Is he just that he can't sleep? Is he happy? Is he depressed? Is he whatever? So those assumptions go into what is shown in your feed. Did
you start seeing a lot of ads for like prostate medicine and stuff like that?
Oh, brother! All right, let's get this thing started here.
I thought
missing the good. No, we're missing the good stuff for the show here. I mean,
I'm tapped out. I got nothing left.
This has been a pre-show special here. All right, here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains, the weekly show that's all about weather. This is episode number 648 for Monday, June 18th, 2018.
Lies.
Secret just
lies.
What?
You're lying.
Okay, great. So let's let the world into the secret here. We're actually recording this on Thursday, June. It's vacation week for some, and therefore we're doing a little Thursday night special. But this is the release date. Will be here. You always set me straight, and I'm thankful for you.
Well, this is akin to, what you're doing here is the same thing that we were questioning on the last week's show. We had our guest Peter from the Farmer's Almanac. You're wanting us to sit here a week in advance and talk about the weather, and for a show that's not going to be released for a while. And he's it's the same thing as him forecasting 2 years in advance of whether or not there's going to be a hurricane in the Mid-Atlantic region. See, how do you feel about it?
You've nailed it. You got it so right. But it is what it is.
The truth.
It's all a lie.
So, Kevin, when do you take a vacation week, and where do you go when you go on vacation?
Very excited. As I said, we had some staffing issues through the spring, so I didn't get much time. I think I have earned 20 or 21 comp days that I will hopefully eventually take, in addition to 2 weeks of vacation. But I just haven't had any in such a long time. So in July, we're going to go visit relatives. On both sides of the family. We call it the grandparents tour. You got to take the grandchild around, right? So we'll go and do that. Kim will know about that soon.
Yes, I will.
September 12th.
Good memory.
I'm always going to remember that. You know why?
Why?
It's the anniversary of Hurricane Frederick.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yep.
Arguably my most important hurricane and one of James's most important hurricanes.
Really?
Yeah, this was 1979, and that happened to be my first week on television in this market.
Oh my gosh! No way.
They sent me down there, and back then we had no live trucks. We found a phone, and we didn't write it out on the coast. We came into an evacuation shelter because they had a working phone in Mobile, and we drove back, and then we flew back down in a helicopter that was brand new. But no, that was a life-changing week. So, yeah, September 12th is a vivid date in my memory up here. So
it is the only time in my entire working career, which now spans, I don't know, almost, what would it be, 40-something years, that I ever lied to my employer was that night.
Oh, yeah?
Because, a hurricane coming into the Gulf Coast for somebody who adored the weather like I did in high school was a huge event. And I was working as an usher at Cobb's Cinema City 8. James, do you remember that place in Birmingham? Kevin, you probably do too.
No.
Might have been a little before Kevin's time.
Yeah.
But it was an 8-plex theater, which is a rarity in 1979. And it was the place to work. And I had a great job, loved it as a senior in high school. And my boss called me that night and said, "Bill, can you come in? One of the popcorn girls can't work tonight because her mom's scared of the hurricane."
Girls.
I'm like, meteorologist
title, by the way.
She has nothing to worry about. Hurricane won't be here till tomorrow. Well, she's not coming in. Can you come in? No, I have a load of homework I have to do. I can't come in tonight. And my homework was to listen to WWL radio out of New Orleans. I just was, enthralled the entire night by these reports. And a lot of them were places like you were in Mobile, James, and it was a life-changing event for me, even though I was 250 miles away in Birmingham.
And by the way, the show title is Popcorn Girl.
Yeah,
that's funny that's what they called them. That was exactly what they were, concession stand attendants, probably more properly. But they in that 1970s era, the manager referred to him as the Popcorn Girl. Can't come in tonight.
It's a little politically incorrect. Wow.
A little bit.
All right.
A little bit.
There's a little rattling in whatever microphone that you're on.
Which one, me?
Bill, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm lucky to be using these AirPods.
Oh, you're using, so it's rattling in your head.
Those rocks
fell into the empty part there. But I'm just lucky to be on tonight because I got trapped here late at work. And
all right, well, Bill, let's bring in our guest before he hangs up on us.
He probably should have already. Of course, Steve Zubrick is a good friend of the show. He's been on a couple of times. He's the Sue at the National Weather Service in Sterling. He's joining us on late notice because tonight's show, of course, is Monday night show when Dr. Phil Klotzbach was supposed to join us. And I reached out to Steve, and he threw things together there in the office. Steve, nice to see you.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound perfect.
Perfect.
Look at
kind of threw it together a little bit here.
We really did.
I had this initially on the iPad and it was working like a champ, and then we went and it didn't work anymore. So
I'm really worried. It seems like every time we do a test late in the day of the show, the guest cannot then get in when the real show link comes. So I do not know what in the world could be causing that, but it's happened twice now in the last 3 weeks.
well, I don't have any earphones. I've got you down on as low as I can get it here, so I don't feedback with you. But
well, this guy's got the technology down pat, James. He understands what we're looking for.
His audio
Steve,
is
you
some of
actually,
the best we've ever
I'm
had.
about to say, Steve, you got the best audio of any guest we've had in a long time here. So what?
Really?
Yeah.
So
this
Right up
Dynex little camera here, and it's a Logitech camera and a Dynex, or the Dynex is actually the name of the tripod, and it's a Logitech camera sitting on top of this. I wish I could show you a picture of it. And it's got little microphones built into it. So it looks really nice. I mean, it's small. It's about the size of a Band-Aid. It's amazing.
Wow.
But we're here in
It's
the
probably-
operations area of the forecast office in
probably
Sterling.
the same one I have. I have a Logitech. I think it's a 920C, and it's about the size of a Band-Aid. I have never used the built-in microphone though, so that's interesting. But it sounds really, really good.
Yeah, it's first time here, and I'm glad to hear that I'm coming through okay.
Yeah, you sound great. Thank you for joining us, Steve. So, James, did you get your light fixed in your office and in your closet there?
No. I've still got my main key light out, and I've decided I might not fix it because I look better in the dark. Much better in the dark.
Excuse me while I turn the lights out here in the office too. That might help things a little bit. But Steve, it's been a while since we talked to you.
I think it was the AM weather, remembering AM weather.
That's just amazing. Yeah, that's great. So take us back to your career start, Steve. What got you interested in weather? How did you come to this career?
Well, I think that would probably, it's appropriate coming up on Father's Day that it would probably be my dad. And he was an avid gardener. He worked in a factory. We grew up in the Midwest in Ohio. And he always wanted to know in summertime if it was going to rain, did he have to water after he came home from work? So, I always tried to put together a forecast for him. So I don't know, that's where it started. But I think the seminal event was back in 1974. I was senior in high school back in Southwest Ohio, and we had a little event back then in early April, the Xenia outbreak. And I was about 10 miles southwest of Xenia. And that really had a number on me. I know, quick story was I was on the golf team, captain of the golf team, and it had rained that morning. And we were supposed to have a match, get this, in Xenia with Xenia High School. But it was canceled because the grounds were too wet. So we were going to have a practice at 4 p.m. School got out at like 2:45. So I puttered around after school, got a milkshake at Dairy Queen, and I started heading down towards the golf course. And where I lived in a suburb of Dayton, in Kettering, it's a glacial moraine, and you actually go. And I was coming westbound to look to essentially go to the golf course, and you had a complete, view from south to west to north. And I just looked to the southwest, and it was pitch black, and you could see lightning. And so I said, I'm not going to do this. That storm's going to be up here. So I just turned around and I went over to my girlfriend's house. We were watching TV, and I actually remember seeing Gil Whitney with the WHIO TV in Dayton. They had an old radar, and they were actually live. He was live. He was showing the hook feature, the 6 that you could see, and you could see that coming towards Xenia. We had like baseball size hail where we were, but I was about 10 miles away from where the F5 hit. So that made a big impact.
I guess so. I was on the other end of that in Alabama that night, and it's the last night that I was ever frightened of the weather, because the lead up to the event was, of course, scary, and then the actual event was, apocryphal. with the news reports, which, were basically, radio reports through the night and break-ins on the television. And you didn't know where these storms were or where they were going, or what, because we had no graphical representation of them at that time. And I really went to bed that night figuring that was my last night on Earth. And when I woke up the next morning, I had a brand new fascination and appreciation of the weather that still endures to this day. So that's probably, in a nutshell, my seminal event too. Steve. And of course, James has incredible stories about that night also, because he was a ham radio operator pressed into service that night. James, I know you tell those stories a lot, but any stories you haven't shared or want to share again?
Well, no, it was life-changing. I was a senior in high school in 1974, and April 3rd, it was a Wednesday night, and I was working net control. My hobby was ham radio for the local emergency network in Tuscaloosa County, Alabama. And Tuscaloosa County did not have any issues that night, but there was an urgent call for help with people with ham radio gear. So I checked in with the principal of the school. He allowed me off 3 days. And so we spent 3 days in some of the hardest hit areas. And the first night, they sent me to a small rural hospital in Jasper, Alabama, where they needed to establish a line of communication between that hospital and some relief agencies in Birmingham. And for some reason, to this day, I don't know why, they put me and my ham radio gear in the emergency room. And the things I saw that night gave me night terrors for several years, where I would wake up in the night sweating based on the grotesque nature of the wounds of those people that were coming in. And I guess I had to experience that. I don't know why. And I've never shared the specifics of what I saw that night with anybody, publicly or privately. I never will. But anyway, yeah, that was one of the sentinel events in my wonder years between the ages of 10 and 20 that really roped me into this. So, Steve, I can totally understand how that night can be life-changing.
Yeah, it definitely was.
So, Steve, I guess you've gone back and studied that event probably pretty extensively. Anything that stands out to you in your meteorological analysis of that event, or anything that that just really reminds you of that other than your personal experience?
Well, it was such a strong storm system for the time. I mean, I don't know a lot of the particulars, but just it was just a very unstable air mass over such a large area for such a long time, and the shear was just incredible. I remember a couple years back here, one of our interns came online here, and I actually took the service assessment from that, and I actually paged through it with the person, and I said, well, you'll probably never see an event like this, in your lifetime, but if you're lucky. But then, several years ago, we had the event down your way in April on the 28th. Was that 2011?
27th of April. That's right.
So, that was a huge event too. And so that got me interested. And I was kind of always interested in science. And so I went and I actually studied physics and got a Bachelor of Science degree in physics with a minor in geology from the University of Dayton. And then I went out to the East Coast at Old Dominion University, got a master's. And I was into the air pollution side for quite a while. And then got a job down in Austin, Texas with a private consulting company, Radian Corporation. Was down there for 5 years. Both my boys were born down there. They're true Texans, which I'm proud of. And but I really wanted to get back into meteorology, so I was able to finagle a job back here in Washington, D.C. at Weather Service headquarters, working in a field it was called Expert Systems Artificial Intelligence. I'd actually done some work with a member of the Turing Institute over in Scotland. His name was Professor Donald Mickey, and he actually worked with Alan Turing, believe it or not. It's from Scotland. And so we were, our company was essentially trying to market a tool that could essentially build knowledge systems. And I built a system, a weather system that essentially did a convective outlook in an automated manner. It went in and got LFM data, it got surface data, upper air data, and it put out kind of a convective outlook. And then at the time, I actually ran these outlooks in quasi real time, and I sent them up to the, well, at the time it was the National Severe Storms Forecast Center up in Kansas City. And so I had some friends up there, and they actually verified the forecast, and that was kind of an interesting thing. And we wrote about that in a book. And the company that I work for, they said, well, you got to give it a name, this system. And so I said, well, how about Willard? so that stuck. So anyway, yeah, so there's a book on that. And then I finally got at Weather Service headquarters for 5 years, and I came out to this office in early 1992, and I've been here since as the first and only science and operations officer.
Wow,
had a few detours along the way, but
that's pretty incredible to to have been at that office for that long and in that role.
Yeah, I mean, I've done some temporary stints. I was acting deputy director at the Weather Prediction Center over with the folks at INSEP in Riverdale, Maryland, a couple of years ago, 4 years ago. So I worked downtown in the NOAA budget office, did a stint down there because I really love numbers. And of course, I worked with the National Weather Association for decades, was president of that in 2010. But really, really enjoy the weather aspects. I'm working shift right now.
Yeah, I guess you're coming to the end of your shift here pretty soon, huh?
Yeah, it technically ended at 10, but I flexed it, so it ends maybe a little later.
So any weather going on in the Mid-Atlantic tonight?
It's been really quiet today, which it's been a little bit of a slog here the last month. Starting around May 10th, about a month ago, we had some severe weather, and then that was a Thursday, and then that following week on Monday, we just started getting hit with lots of flooding. Flooding that takes out gauges, for example, washes out roads, and that I think was kind of setting the stage for the interesting event that occurred, the tragic event, the catastrophic event of Ellicott City back on May 27th, which was the second time that the Old Town part of that town had gotten devastated. The previous one was back in July 30th of 2016. And these events that they had were basically, they talk about, what is the percent chance of it happening? And well, it's like a 0.1% chance. And, if you tack on years, they say 1 in 1,000. But we all know, that's really, for people who try to design systems. And we know that those type of events could happen, not 1,000 years from now, but maybe 1,000 days or maybe 100 days from now. And in fact, it did occur, unfortunately for them, and in a short span of about 22 months.
So you did an outstanding presentation on it at NWA a couple of years ago. I can't remember which one, but it was one of the best presentations I saw. The videos and photographs were just astounding.
Right.
I mean, literally astounding. The video from inside the jewelry store. This was shocking textbook. This is what a flash flood can do.
Right.
So, talk about the meteorological setup for that first event in 2016 and how it was similar or dissimilar to this one.
Well, the first event in 2016, the air mass over the Mid-Atlantic region was typically moist as we find in midsummer. Precipitable water values, I think, were approaching 2 inches. It was a Saturday. It was actually a Saturday evening when that event occurred. We knew that there would be some places that would have localized flash flooding. We had a couple of flash flood warnings out earlier in the day for some other spots. They were more rural in nature. But that particular day back in 2016, you had a couple of boundaries that were involved with that system that kind of locked it in place. you know, typically what we have in the summertime is we get a Chesapeake Bay breeze. You know, if you have like southwesterly winds, you'll usually have a bay breeze that kind of works its way westward during the afternoon from the bay. But actually, that really wasn't, involved in this case. It was more just there was some earlier shower and thunderstorm activity that kind of propagated some boundaries toward that area. And then it just trained over that area for, you know, several hours and produced, you know, the phenomenal rainfall amounts that you know, we reported on in those presentations, you know, 6 to 8 inches that fell primarily on the watershed that encompasses that area. The watershed there is about 9.5 square kilometers, and you know, the average rainfall over that area was, you know, between 4 and 5 inches in about a 2-hour time frame. Some of the other interesting aspects, you know, just of that city is that part of the old town is built directly on what was originally a river that was running through that town. And that town sits on the Patapsco River, which is not a big river by any stretch. It's barely navigable, but there were some, you know, it was kind of like a mill town, and they developed the town over the Tiber River, and they literally built the buildings right over the river at the time. And there's 2 other drainage systems there, the New Cut and the Hudson Branch, and they all kind of filter into that section of the old town, and they just it gets overwhelmed. And what was interesting is that when we were looking back in our research of past flooding in that town, it actually had occurred, I think it was 7 times before. Some of them tropical systems, some of them not. It's just the way that the town has some topography too. It's like if you stand on Main Street down by the railroad bridge that you often see where the cars are all piled up, that street there, if you go off to the south, you'll climb a hill and you'll be 150 feet above the town the next block over. So there's quite a bit of steep relief there. It's almost like a canyon. And of course, there's been a lot of development. You know, there's questions about how much development has caused runoff issues there. And certainly, if you like the videos that we showed at our last presentation, there's a fellow up there that installed 12 more cameras. And they're not just security cameras. These are just cameras that are looking down at tributaries and creeks and places. And we're just now seeing some of those videos, and it's incredible, just incredible. I think the day of the event on May 27th, there were also some Twitter posts I saw where people were posting videos from the second floor story of buildings from Main Streets, and you could literally just see water gushing out of the first floor of a building. That building was one of the buildings that was built over the Tiber River. Now, since that time, they've actually been able to build kind of a channel through there. So it's kind of a rectangular, you know, it's about 8 feet wide by 8 feet tall, or maybe 10 feet wide by about 8 feet tall. And then the structures of the buildings sit on top of that. But it's just, you know, it's just a matter of putting too much water in one place in one short time.
So, Steve, I have to stop and say hello to Tanya Franson, who's joined. Tanya, I think I never say your name right. Make sure you're unmuted. I always want to say Tanya Francine.
Tanya Francine. You're close. You got
Okay.
the southern ring to it.
Francine. Okay. All right. I just, you know, then I'm like, when I get to introduce you, I'm like, maybe it's really Francine. I think I heard Jan. No, I don't know. Okay. So anyway, thank you for joining us. We're so glad you're here. It's still light where you are.
It is. Well, it's mountain time.
And
But
so,
I'm a little bit off because I've been in DC for the last 2 weeks, so it's almost bedtime for me.
Well, good. Well, we're not going to stay up too late today. But Tanya, of course, is the MIC at the National Weather Service in Glasgow, Montana, and out there in Big Sky Country. And you know Steve Zubrick, our friend.
I do know. I don't know if we met, but I know of him. Yes.
So join us now. We're talking about the Ellicott City flood, Tanya, for a few minutes. Then I want to hear from you about your mentoring work and about the policy colloquium you've just been at AMS. But let's talk just Steve here for a few more minutes and talk about this historic flood that hit a few weeks ago in Maryland. So Steve, you were saying, you know, this guy who put all the videos up, did he expect this might happen again?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Did he expect
in the background?
did they expect that did he expect that this flood might occur again? And is that why he put all the cameras?
Yeah, I think that he had one camera up beforehand, and I think somehow he thought that it would be worth it to try to map out the topography of water, you know, in future events if they were to occur. And it turned out that he had a lot of foresight. So we've been seeing some of these camera views, and they're just phenomenal. The amount of water that is flowing. And then today I was talking with my colleague over at the USGS, John Dillow, and he's in the Baltimore district of the USGS, the Geological Survey. And they actually have gone into Ellicott City since the flood this year, and they've done high water marks. They also, back in 2016, they did high water marks too. So they essentially are trying to determine peak discharge. Preliminary information that he relayed to me today was that the flooding that occurred this May 2018 in Ellicott City had more discharge than what happened in 2016. So it was bad in 2016. It was, in terms of water discharge, it was actually worse in 2018.
How did the rainfall amounts compare between the two events?
They were,
from what you know.
The distribution was different, but the amounts were comparable. Certainly, you know, I saw the county gauge, I think, up about a half mile out of the town, they had over 4 inches. We had reliable reports of 4 to 5 inches throughout that area, and most of it fell in about, you know, a 90-minute to 2-hour period. And this was kind of, not that it really maybe mattered that much, but we'd really been on a wet pattern since, you know, about mid-May, May 15th. So, you know, there was no room in the ground for anything to soak in. Everything basically ran off that fell that day. The two storms that caused this too were different in the sense that the one in 2016 had very little lightning. You can see a few flashes here and there, but the one this year, it featured a tremendous amount of lightning. The other thing that we should kind of keep in mind is that, you know, we hear Ellicott City certainly, and there was a tremendous amount of damage there. But just across the river in Baltimore County to the east of the main part of Ellicott City, they had a tremendous amount of rainfall, and they had a lot of damage in terms of maybe not, you know, flash flooding, but just inundation of just areas of residential property. And, you know, they're still, you don't hear about Catonsville, Maryland, for example, but they also got really whacked hard with rainfall. And in fact, I think the rainfall was a little more intense over there than it was, you know, across the river, the Patapsco.
You know, I've been wondering about that. I saw the rainfall totals and some of the videos. Of course, there's not as much that's not coming out of Ellicott City, but why do you think it is that the outlying areas haven't gotten as much attention? Do you think it might be that there were these two events and it's just natural to draw the attention to Ellicott City, or is there something else about it that got all the attention? I
think that the tremendous flash flooding aspects of Ellicott City with the raging torrents of water rolling down the streets with cars floating by, with water coming out of the buildings. Just that really leaves a big impression. I think, on the other side of the river, it was just more just inundation. It just looked like a lake. The cars were underwater. Houses were flooded, but it wasn't like things were raging. That's kind of the impression that I got. I think though that everyone did focus attention on Ellicott City.
Yes, maybe just a little bit less dramatic, so it gets a little bit less of the press.
Yeah.
I'm curious, after 2016 too, Ellicott City got a lot of attention. There were some outlying areas in that event too that had been flooded. Do you know how their recovery went, and what the trajectory looks like for recovery this time?
I think in the 2016 event, I think, they recovered in all areas. And in fact, for downtown Ellicott City, this year, a lot of the businesses this spring were just again reopening. So it's just, it's heartbreaking to see this happen again.
Yeah. It definitely is, and I've already started to see some local conversation about whether or not to rebuild. It's for all the reasons you've talked about. It's a risky area. What are people saying?
And I had some conversations with some fellow scientists, meteorologists that I know, and it's kind of piqued their interest that they've had 2 events in 2 years. And they're interested perhaps in running some high resolution model simulations to try to capture this, because the models that the suite of models, in the weather enterprise that we currently have, be it from the government or in the private sector, I just don't think that it can handle these type of very fine scale, mesoscale details that are bringing these amounts of rainfall. Just last week in Oklahoma City, they had a flash flood emergency on the 7th.
Yeah.
And we had a review of that event, a national review today. There's a group within the Weather Service who kind of looks at the models on a kind of a weekly basis. And I'm part of that group. And so we looked at that data. Jeff Manikin from the INSEP, he basically led the presentation and showed that there weren't many models that were really focusing in on what was going to happen in Oklahoma City. I have seen some guidance with the May 27th Ellicott City system that suggested that maybe something was going to happen in the afternoon. But we kind of see that guidance all the time, and you can't kind of reach for the 95th percentile accumulations to come true. So that's it's difficult. There is I'm trying to remember the group. I think it's part of NSSL. They are running a multi-member ensemble too that's based off of the what we call the WRF model system, the weather research forecast model. And they've been running a nest of, I want to say it's some outrageous number, like 30 members, but they essentially will place it around the country and run it once per day, and they only run it out like 6 to 10 hours. Unfortunately, on May 27th, they did not run it over Ellicott City.
Oh.
But I have seen some of the guidance. It's publicly available. It's I think if you Google NSSL, NSSLE, I think is what it's. Oh no,
Was it the Newsy?
Newsy, yes.
Yeah.
NEWS-E, yeah. That viewer is available to anyone with a web link. And one of the earlier events that we had back in mid-May, where we lost one of our stream gauges up in Frederick County, Maryland, and they had like 6 inches of rain, in like 3 hours. It's the Ensemble Max from that multi-member high-res model system was actually pinpointing that area.
Oh,
So
wow. Interesting.
it was interesting.
Yeah, and it is hard to know what to do with that. You get one system that might nail it, but without hindsight, without the value of hindsight, like you said, every time a model puts out something like that, do you jump on it? Do you use that as the basis of your forecast? Like you said, it's rare. It's tough to hang your hat on something like that.
Exactly.
Hmm. Yeah, sorry, Bill. Didn't mean to derail. I was just really
No,
interested
that's
in
the whole point.
yeah,
Thank you,
the
Kim, for
local
jumping in.
perspective on all of that, and I'm actually really interested that you brought up the Oklahoma City event because, humorously enough, so I'm in Norman, and my parents just a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, moved to Oklahoma City, moved to this area, and I had to I called my mother to stop her from driving into the flash flood because
Oh
I
my God.
realized that she was trying to leave. A Target in Norman, and she drove, and there was an intersection she couldn't get through, so she started to drive north toward Moore, where the flooding was happening. And I went, "Oh no, oh no!" And I called her, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm seeing some water crossing the road, and in the it's like in these gullies, and it's crossing the road, and there's a car in front of me though that's fording it. I think I can too." And I was like, "No, no, 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 no." No, no, no. No, you don't. No, you don't. That is exactly what it looks like right before your car is swept away. You just turn around.
Right.
So I got to have a really
And
turn around, don't drown.
it's something that happens so gently. I mean, it comes up upon you. It's like, oh, there's water in front of me. Oh, it's flowing over the roads. But, the public just doesn't, they don't kind of crystallize the threat that is to them.
Right.
And they always think the bad things happen to other people. And that's kind of a bias that we have, kind of a survival bias. It's, but for some folks, it's not. So
yeah, it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing. Well, I'm fascinated to hear about the review that, it didn't seem like there was any guidance that we could have relied on to know that was going to happen ahead of time. It just kind of happened.
I think that one of the takeaway from that event, from today's review, was that the storms essentially built to the south along an old outflow boundary, and none of the models really had that solution. The NAM nest model, the 3-kilometer NAM nest model that NSEP runs, it actually had something building down to the south, but it did not have that in the right place at the right time.
Really interesting. Well, thanks for sharing, Bill. Sorry, I'll hand the reins back over to our master interviewer.
Please join in. Tanya, I know you probably have a burning question. Then I have some questions about the warning process, how it worked. It seemed like it was really good for me. But Tanya, talk to Steve for a minute about whatever you want to ask or comment on.
I actually got to go to Ellicott City 2 Saturdays ago. I went up to Baltimore to visit some friends, and while we were there, it started raining, and I have to say it left an uneasy pit in my stomach to be there. Even as a trained meteorologist who could probably have 8 ways to get the flash flood warning on my phone if it were needed, it was a little unsettling. I was in an area I wasn't familiar with. I really didn't know which way was north, south, east, or west. I didn't know which way the rivers were running. I got to see, they always say they paved paradise and put up a parking lot. There's a lot of parking lots in Ellicott City at the top of the mountain before you go down in. And so I guess for me, the questions I would have is, what kind of things are you doing with your emergency managers to be kind of prepared ahead of time for these? Are you, we do our traditional decision support services with maybe emails or phone calls, but are you doing anything above and beyond that? You talked about improved modeling potentially. Are you bringing them into that so they can maybe look at some of it for decision making?
Yes. Well, it's funny, just 2 weeks prior to the event, we had our service hydrologists present a Skywarn meeting on flooding in Howard County, which is where this is, and in Columbia, Maryland, and it was well attended by all of the EMs, all of the emergency workers, and just the general public as well. And we of course went over the 2016 event, and we went over how you prepare yourself. I think that the issues that you raised there about being someone who's visiting an area and you don't know, what's north, south, east, west, which way the rivers flow. I think that's a tremendous issue, in trying to get people prepared in this country for weather threats. That you're in some strange area and you don't know what typically happens. I've heard of tragic cases out in the Southwest, in the desert Southwest, where people do canyon climbing, and then they have these flash floods that are occurring, maybe 5 miles away, and they're in a really narrow crevice canyon, and all of a sudden they're trapped and swept away. So that's a tough problem. I'm not sure how to deal with that on an individual basis, but for the emergency managers, we meet with them very regularly. Of course, we do the DSS. We had a flash flood watch out on this. They have a whole list of things that they do when they have a flash flood watch and preparations that they do. After 2016, certainly in Ellicott City, they were keenly aware of the issues. I know when the first warning went out from our office shortly after 3 o'clock, I heard that several of the businesses along that main street were ushering the people out and telling them to leave the city, and they were closing. So I do think that warning process, with the people there, even if the people didn't, get a warning maybe on their phone or something, or ignored it, they were being ushered out by the business owners there, which I think was very responsible.
Feedback I got from people at the event I was at, and these are all non-meteorologists, was that they actually knew the flash flood warning existed and they knew that there was a serious situation. So kudos to you all for that. It always makes my heart smile when you talk to non-weather people and they kind of praise what the Weather Service did. And some of them didn't know it was Weather Service, but they did get the warnings. So to me, that's still a win in our book.
Yep. Good. Thank you.
So take us through that chronology a little bit, Steve. The warnings and when the flooding reached its peak, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, the flash flood watch, just going back days, we were talking, several days before, we were talking about the potential for localized flooding somewhere, which is kind of a buzz phrase. But then that morning, in fact, the guy is right over my shoulder that issued the flash flood watch. He's working the evening shift with me. But they issued that, and that, again, that got a lot of media attention, and especially up in that area. And so the day, kind of started, with just in the afternoon, you started seeing some storms popping up here and there. It wasn't too bad, but, we started issuing flood warnings pretty early on. And then I think around 3:19, we issued our first flood warning. Later on, we issued around 4:26, we issued another flash flood warning, basically updating things. We issued around, I think 4:34, we were talking about, we issued a local storm report of flooding that was occurring in that area. And then our service hydrologist, I think he got called in. It was a Sunday, I believe, and he came in and kind of recognized it. And I believe that at 4:40 we updated our flash flood warning because we were getting information about from emergency management in that county that things were getting bad. And in essence, at that point, we declared a flash flood emergency, which we used 3 times in May, believe it or not, all warranted. And we noted in our statement that this is a particularly dangerous situation. Seek higher ground now. And then I think between 4:30, 5:30, just tremendous rises and just tremendous flash flooding there. I know at around 5:30 we issued a statement in it, and I'm reading it. It said, "This is an extremely dangerous and potentially catastrophic situation, you must move to higher ground immediately. Stay away from anywhere where water is moving. And so, and we actually had kind of two waves of rainfall this time around. We had the first batch, and that was catastrophic enough. But then there was a little bit of a lull for like 30 minutes, and the water levels started going down. But then there were storms that were still back building and to the west, and they were moving to the east. And those hit, and that essentially recreated the torrent of rainfall, and that recreated the flash flooding. And so we were warning our first responders that they had to be very wary of going in with the second wave of flooding that was going to occur. And they heeded that advice. There was one fatality, tragically, in this event this year, and that was a veteran. I think it was an Air Force veteran, and he was trying to help a woman, and he helped her, and she got to safety, but he didn't. So it was tragic. Someone gave their life to help someone else.
Well, it's amazing that the death toll was not greater again.
I remember talking to the emergency manager back in 2016, because myself and our service hydrologist, did essentially a flash flood storm survey 2 days after the event. And he told me that there was one restaurant downtown that was completely surrounded by raging water, and they weren't sure that and there were people in the restaurant. They were on the second floor, and they could not get out. There were over 50 people, and he really thought that building was going to collapse, and all those people were going to go in. And that could have been very tragic back then.
Just simply amazing. Now, I've heard some anecdotal stories that the WEAs, the alerts, were late at times. Have you heard that in that situation, Steve?
In which situation?
In the 2018, the recent flood, that the emergency alerts to people's cell phones in some cases were very late with the flash flood warning. Have you heard instances of that, or is that
no? We issued a flood warning shortly after 3 o'clock, when things were kind of like, is it really going to be a flash flood or not? And the flood warnings are essentially not EAS alerted. And then, it continued raining there, and we issued the flood warning, the flash flood warning, shortly after 4 o'clock, and that was EAS alerted. And I think everybody's phones went off on that. The first warning, though, did get a lot of media coverage, and people were aware of it. And that's the stories that we heard, were people closing down businesses, with that first warning.
Now, is that a stream that you actually issued river forecasts for? Was it a river flood warning or an aerial flood warning, that first one?
The first one was essentially what you would call an aerial flood warning. The Patapsco River did briefly go above flood stage. I think it might have been a little later, maybe a day or two later, and it also did it that night as well. But the flooding from that is really not, the issue in that town. It's it really is the rain that's coming down from all of the different tributaries that you have: the Tiber, the New Cut, the Hudson Branch, all of those things essentially going into one place, and that's downtown Ellicott City.
Well, I'll ask you and Tanya this question. It seems like a lot of dissemination channels don't take aerial flood warnings as seriously as they do flash flood warnings. Why is that, and how do we change it, or do we need to change it?
I'll
Steve,
start. I think
Tanya,
one of the things is they're worried about people turning them off, and turning their cell phones off for getting too many warnings and too many alerts. And with aerial flood warnings, the need to act isn't quite as critical as with a flash flood or a tornado warning. I'd like to see a day where we could push things like that out to the general public, and have them know that it's okay to get that false alarm once in a while. The Weather Service forecasters have a real big fear of false alarms and over alarming people. But if you look at some of the social science community studies, they find that it's not as big a deal as some of us forecasters think it is. And then that's just the core of it. And then to me, the next part is convincing the FCC, FEMA, and NOAA that these are things that should be in the wireless emergency alerts. You know, we've had them for several years now, and we can't even get them to add the tags so that severe thunderstorm warnings, I mean, out here, 120-mile-an-hour wind is a lot more dangerous than the little F0 spin-up tornado that we get, and yet people don't get those alerts on their phone. So just even adding those tags of the wind and the hail size to a severe so we could get the alerts has taken years, and I don't know really what the holdup is. It would be nice to get an answer on that.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, you know, back in 2012, we kind of taught the people in this area what the word derecho meant. And June 29th, 2012, it happened. It was about this time at night, you know, about 10:30 that it went through Washington, D.C. And, you know, we had severe thunderstorm warnings out. We had enhanced wording in all of our statements. We had special weather statements leading up to it. But really, you know, you can't tone alert at the time. And, you know, she's talking about the tags, you know, we still can't really do that. Whereas if I saw a little spin up tornado and issued a TOR on it, then we'll get an EAS on that for something that's 40 yards wide by maybe, you know, 2 blocks. So we really need that flexibility to put that stuff in there.
So Kim, Tanya mentioned that, you know, maybe false alarms are not quite the problem that we think they are. How do you weigh in on that as a social scientist?
I think that she's got a great handle on the literature. Good job, Tanya. Yeah, yeah, no, that's exactly where our community is right now, is that there have been studies done that encompass a number of different, you know, ways of thinking about if this is a problem, and the jury is really out. The bottom line is the jury is out. And one of the big reasons why the jury is out is, while it might seem logical to, you know, when you have so many false alarms, sure, you know, you get to a point where, yes, it can become a problem. And there have been some local studies that have shown that to be the issue. Joplin, for example, I think is the quintessential example of this being an issue. However, you need to explore what the trade-offs are. So if you have a constant level of technology, if you're going to try to reduce your false alarms, then you trade off for missing detections. And you know, what is the trade-off there? What hurts people more? It really is, for some places, the forecasting challenge is just extremely difficult. There are some regimes where you just get the QLCS spin up, these brief, weak tornadoes, maybe non-classical environments, non-classical structures, or just non-classic supercell structures, where it's harder to detect them. And so you have to really think about what is really worthwhile here to the population that we're serving. Would they be best served by trying to capture everything in this very fine net and make sure we get every single little spin up? Or maybe is it more valuable to focus on the big deals? I mean, what you guys were just talking about is a matter of scale. I think that's a really important thing to think about with things like, you know, tornadoes and other phenomena. What really matters, not just the metric, but what really matters. And so, yeah, Tanya is, in short, very correct in that the social scientific community doesn't have a consensus, and it's not necessarily as simple as we make it out to be using the Weather Service measures of what counts as a false alarm.
So James, I know you're going to want to run some recorded segments here in a second. So let's ask Steve one more question. You've been really gracious to stay up late with us on short notice, and I know you want to get away, Steve. But Kevin picked up on something you said earlier, and I did too. I'll let Kevin ask the question because I thought this would be an interesting transition as we let you get away for the night. Kevin, take it away.
Well, I'm thrilled to have two Weather Service folks here. The question goes to, well, let me say where it's based on. My pick of the week is a recent blog post that Nate sent around from Cliff Mass, and it is titled Reforming the National Weather Service, Part 1, changing the role of human forecasters. And so there was discussion. Steve, you were discussing, you said AI a couple of times and models, and those are obviously progressing. But I would love to hear this from you two folks, this increased discussion about the human role in forecasting going forward, especially the National Weather Service folks, and anybody can take that.
Well, let me take it. I do have an interest in the technological side of things, with the ability to use, things like AI with computers. And now it's more that you're running more and more sophisticated models that are incorporating more data. And they're doing essentially assimilations of the atmosphere, and they're starting to get it right, but it's going to take time. With the Oklahoma City case last week, with our current state of models, you really need the human to look at the model guidance and say, okay, here's the 13Z HER model, and its 2-hour forecast is right now, and it's not working out. Okay, so you need somebody that's doing that type of analysis. Now, it's certainly conceivable as technology becomes, cheaper and faster and better, all that stuff, that the computers are going to be doing that. The role, there will always be a role for the human in meteorology, because we have to get people to act. And I'm not sure, any set of bank of computers off in a room are going to get people to act. I think it's all about relationships. I think meteorologists, things that they should be studying in school right now are things like communications and the social aspects. It's trying to get people to get off center, especially in extreme events, in your 1% type of events. I've done many conference calls in the nation's capital where I'm on the line, and I've got the director of OPM, Office of Personnel Management, and I've got the whole Council of Governments, and they're trying to figure out, is what I'm saying about a snowstorm that hasn't even started, but it's supposed to start during the morning rush hour. They're listening to me at 9 p.m. the night before. Are we going to close government? They're not. They're going to look at the human, to help them make that decision, and how we spin that information. Now, maybe 10, 15, 20 years down the road, maybe it's 5, but at some point, we'll be running high resolution models, or they're going to be very sophisticated ensembles of mesoscale models that we currently think of. And 90% of the time, maybe they'll get the initiation and convection correctly. They'll get the back building of convection correctly. They'll get the mesoscale bands of snow correctly. But you're still dealing with people who have to do things, and I think that's going to be the role of meteorologists, is to take that mountain of information and try to essentially create it into something that they can spin.
You said something about,
not the right word, but that they can use to try to get that.
You said something about personal relationships. When you say that, do you mean with the general public, or do you mean partners like EMA? Well,
it would be nice to have a personal relationship with all of the public. Certainly, that's difficult. I mean, the people that I'm thinking of are the real core partners that we have to that are in charge of the public as we know it. That they're going to go out and put salt trucks down on the roads, and they're going to go out and evacuate people from the flooded areas. That they're going to essentially get people in the shelters, before the derecho hits. That type of people.
Has the role of social, I'm sorry to interrupt you, has the role of social media helped in the personal relationships with the public?
Yeah, I think that it has. I think it's, added some complexity, but it's also offered some advantages that you can get that message out. and it gets wide distribution, and they see it on their phones. So that certainly has been part of the game-changing experience that we're seeing in today's society.
And Tanya nodded somewhat vigorously yes at that. Weigh in on that personal relationship with the public, Tanya.
Here in Northeast Montana, it's huge. I can almost knock on everyone's doors. We had severe weather this morning, and we were able to call all the weather spotters out ahead of the storm, so they would call us after it went through. So it's Steve's going, that's not fair. I'm also not dealing with calls from OPM and headquarters sites, thank goodness. But for us out here, if anybody knows me, they know I'm a social person, and 15 years as the warning coordination meteorologist and 3 years as an MIC, I have been able to cultivate those relationships, and our partners trust our staff. Our public trusts our staff. I like the part of social media where we can be human and kind of give a little bit of our personalities sometimes. I think the public really appreciates that part of it. As for the Cliff Mass blog, for our staff, we actually had a discussion back and forth, and 90% of it they agreed with. We've been trying to, and I think we're a lot farther along than some offices may be in regards to not worrying about what the temperatures are on days 4, 5, and 6 when the storm is on day 3. We run Forecast Builder. We've seen our verification scores go up. Ensemble models have changed a lot of things for us. The one concern I have is how do we carefully communicate probabilistic to the public? We've been doing the probabilistic snowfall stuff, which I know Steve's office has been doing that as well. And we kind of get mixed results with some of that. We've been just trying to share it with the partners for now, but I see some offices doing it with the public, and the comments I see are kind of a mixed bag. So I think we have a lot more work to do on the communication side of our forecasts. And who are we supposed to be communicating with? I'm learning constantly that there's people out there that should be our partners using our information. And I have 12 counties and 50,000 people. I don't know how Steve's office does it.
And then I'll ask Steve the same question. Tanya, there are no restrictions, nobody to answer to. You get whatever you want. What would you want to see as far as an improvement in the relationship and the communication with the public as opposed to the partners?
Oh, I'd love videos to be easier to make. Putting videos together that are compliant for those with special needs, and waiting for a 3-minute video to render for 45 to 50 minutes. And I see Bill shaking his head, and James probably sees this too, but 45 minutes to render a video, my Lord, that's just, you might as well just tie my hands up and take me out of operations while I'm waiting for it all to finish.
James has got a closet full of old MacBook Pros that I'm sure he would.
Yeah, we can fix that problem.
And how much internet bandwidth do you have, James? Maybe you could get that for the Weather Service.
Nah, they got big pipes. They've got big pipes.
Same question then, you and obviously in a different situation, you can wave your magic wand and improve the communication with the public. What would you want?
That's to me, right? I don't know if I have an easy answer for it. We have over 8 million people here. They're from all walks of life. Some of them I don't even, speak their language. It's a difficult problem. We have this concept in the Weather Service that we're trying to do is to have a weather-ready nation. A lot of the decisions that people make are an individual basis. Is somebody, for example, am I going to drive into work today knowing that there's a winter weather advisory for 1 to 2 inches of snow, and they walk outside and they walk to their car, and they slip a couple of times, and then they look at the road and it's slippery. I mean, maybe they can't, afford to miss work. And so people, they press on, they try to, do the responsible thing, show up at work. I just don't know. I don't have any answer on how to do it. It's just, I think we need to continue to develop the credibility of our forecasts, to always increase the science that we're using to back our forecasts with. I mean, we can do great DSS communicating in wonderful terms, but if the overall basic forecast kind of bites the big one, then why do it? People are gonna remember that.
I'm sorry.
So it's, I don't know. I don't actually. One thought that I have had is that I think in today's society, and I remember thinking about this for a while, it's systemic that we don't really do a good job of meteorological and weather education in our public schools at, starting with the grade school level. So it's almost like I would create some type of education department that's focused on, all sorts of disasters or things that you need to be aware of, like not only weather, but, maybe flooding and, geological issues, volcanoes, not to scare people, but to make them aware of, here are the natural causes that may impact you down the road. And these are the sources of information that you can use to make informed decisions. And you've got to start that at an early age.
Tanya, you said, I think you read the Cliff Mass post. You said you guys discussed it. Can you flesh out the color, give us some of the color of your conversation there?
So one of the things he had in there was forecasters becoming partners with model and machine learning developers, pointing out the problems with the automated systems and working to address them. When you're a midnight shift person and it's 2 a.m. and the models are completely, we had it this morning. I walked in at 7 a.m. and by 7:20 we were issuing warnings and we had nothing on the radar at 7 a.m. And yet none of the models were picking up on that until 17Z today. So what our forecasters would like is an easier mechanism to have that interaction with the developers to provide their feedback. We have our science and operations officers, but they're not here 24/7. They also go on vacations and they go on work trips. And so there's not a real good mechanism. Not everyone is using our internal communication VLab. Not everyone's signed up in there to do that. A few times people have provided feedback and gotten hands slapped for it. So I think that's one of the areas, and it wasn't from our office, but we've seen it. And I see Steve's raising his eyebrows. We could chat offline, but they're telling us, oh, that's not the right route. You should have gone this way, or to me, it doesn't matter how the information gets to a developer as long as they're getting the information. The other thing that was in there was, let's see, intervening and altering forecasts during the rare occasions when objective systems are failing. That's great, except for look at the number of retirees we're going to have in the next 5 years. We are losing decades of institutional knowledge, and we're bringing in people who are coming into areas that are not familiar with the climatology, the weather. And so when they intervene, they might be picking the right time and they might not be. So the institutional knowledge we're going to be learning over or losing in the next 5 years is detrimental to us. We've got amazing people coming into the agency. I'm so excited for the 72 interns that just got hired in the last few months. But we are losing some really good talent and experience and leadership.
Okay, guys, we're going to take a quick break here. And Steve, thank you. You've spent an hour and a half with us. We know you need to go home. It's late. Thank you so much for being on the show with us. Always great having you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. It's good to see all of you. I hope you have a good evening. Thank you.
Okay, great. Great, Steve. Thanks a lot. And what we're going to do is take a break here. We're going to listen to Tony Rice. By the way, Brian Peters is still somewhere, Brian, or Bill, in the Gulf of Mexico, allegedly, on some cruise ship, right? So we don't have a Weather Brains 101. We do have an astronomy report from Tony Rice. We'll come back and we'll do picks of the week and much more as Weather Brains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Right now, the Mars Exploration Rover Opportunity is hunkered down in low power mode. When you get your power from solar panels, atmospheric opacity is a pretty big deal, and it's not very good right now. A 7 million square mile dust storm is passing over the rover. That's about the size of North America. The team running the rover from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, are confident, though, that this golf cart-sized rover will make it through just fine. She's been through dust storms before. OPI weathered a much larger storm back in 2007 with an atmospheric opacity, or tau, of 5.5. That equates to less than 1% of sunlight making it to the ground. Rover operations were suspended for about 2 weeks then. This storm, though, is estimated at a tau of 10.8 as of Sunday morning. It's an exponential scale, too, so the rover's basically in the dark. On Sunday, though, engineers received signals from the rover in the middle of that storm. It's a good sign that the battery levels remain good. The latest temperature report was a balmy -20 Fahrenheit, or -29 Celsius. One of the nice things about dust storms is they tend to absorb some heat, raising the ambient temperature around the rover, even at night, reducing the need to run heaters to keep the rover alive. These storms can also clean a bit of the accumulated dust off the solar panels, leading to increased power production on the other side. Here's hoping. Today is Opportunity's 5,111th Martian day, or SOL, of its 90-SOL primary mission. That's not unlike getting more than 500 years out of the family car. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
Tony Rice always has great stuff for us as we look to the sky. Kim, we get a chance to talk to Tanya about the summer policy colloquium, AMS. She just got back from it. I heard you almost got $1,000, Tanya. Was that true on your airline flight? What happened there?
Oh, they overbooked the flight from Minneapolis to Billings by 8 people. And so, at $700, I jumped out of my seat, but trying to get my little 9-seater aircraft back to Glasgow, they were booked for the next 2.5 days. And then my husband decided, you know what, go to the airport 50 miles east. The boys will go pick you up for $700. At that point, they'd moved up to $800. And when they hit 1,000, I was trying to make that $49 reservation at the airport, and their app was too slow. And a family of 9 who were from Michigan traveling to Banff and Glacier jumped up and said, "We have 9, we'll take the voucher." They got $9,000. And I stood there going, ugh, somewhere.
Oh, the travails of trying to fly to Montana.
My husband's like, for $1,000, I'd have sent the boys all the way to Billings, 275 miles to pick them up.
I flew into Billings last July or August, and it was on a huge Airbus 320 or something.
Yeah,
out of
Billings
Minneapolis.
Planes. It's to the smaller airport. So I was on a 9-seater airplane.
But there's a lot of people coming to Montana. That's crazy.
That's good. We will take them. The Washington Post 3 months ago officially called Glasgow the middle of nowhere. They scientifically researched it. The farthest any major shopping. And you know what? People here are so proud of it that we've got T-shirts made that say, "I'm from the middle of nowhere."
Wow.
Well, we have friends that live in Bozeman, and they were so angry when someone moved a mile away from them, they built a huge berm so they couldn't see them.
I should not see people. No.
We say it's a state full of friends you just haven't met yet.
Oh.
So talk about some of the things that were talked about at the colloquium in Washington.
Wow. What an experience. So 12 years ago, I did Weather and Society Integrated Studies in the very original workshop. It was a year or two later, I met Kim for the first time. And that really got my interest in societal impacts. And when you talk about societal impacts and you look at it, a lot of things are driven by policy. And I didn't know anything about policy before that. So for every year, Gina Esco and Kim and Bill Hook would tell me, why aren't you in the policy colloquium? And I had kids playing baseball in the summer. And my youngest finally graduated. He's not doing baseball this year. And I thought, you know what, it's my time to invest in me. And the Weather Service invested in me to go. We had a group of about 35 people. There was more women than men, which was kind of a first for me, to have to wait in line in the bathroom during the breaks. That just never happens. But it was awesome. It was awesome. We had people from different parts of the world who were all in the U.S. We had a lot of operational people, researchers, and then we had a lot of grad students and PhD students. So great talent. We spent half a day in the House office building up on the Hill and heard from staffers on various committees, of course, commerce committees. We heard from Senator Whitehouse from Connecticut. The second day we went to the first day was Senate, second day was the House offices. And we had Bill Foster from Illinois was there. He was very interesting. He's the only PhD congressman in the Senate. His PhD is in nuclear physics, and he ran the CERN lab in Switzerland for 25 years, and decided that he could make better contributions as a politician. So it was fun that they gave their time to us, because, you know, we kind of feel like we're these young people who have very little influence, and yet these big heavy hitters gave us time. We had people from the State Department, the Homeland Security, Office of Management and Budget. 24 years in the Weather Service, and I finally think I know how our budget works. I think. I'm not sure. We'll see. But that was kind of fun. But it was, you know, a good solid 7-8 days of 8-9 hour days, hearing from people in the private sector and the public sector, NGOs. The very last talk were 2 people from the conference on bishops from the Catholic Church here in the US, and then from the Quakers, and how they are trying to influence policy on the Hill. So it was just a little bit mind-blowing. I should show you, this is my notebook, and it's completely full of notes.
Wow.
I didn't take the laptop because my fear was that work emails and things would draw my attention away from this really awesome opportunity. So I still have to type some of those up. It's going to take a while. But I don't know, Kim, you did it a couple of years. You did it much longer ago than I did.
You know, I did it the same summer as I did Was Is. I did it in the summer of 2008. And that was quite a summer. It was June, I did the policy colloquium, and then August, I went out to Boulder and did Was Is. I was an eager kid coming straight out of my master's, like, I'm going to do all the things. I was surprised they let me in the door, but I was really grateful that they did, because I had no idea about any of the things that we were introduced to in DC, and I was doing research related to policy for climate, and I was just so humbled by the opportunity, and I know that that's how you felt too. There is nothing quite as humbling as seeing what all is going on. And did you walk away with a more favorable impression of what's likely happening in DC, or a less favorable or more complex? What's your overall perspective now? How has it shifted what you thought?
You know, I did come out overall with a more favorable impression that, you know, when you're out in Montana and you're looking at what's happening in the news and stuff, and you're going, what the heck are they doing out there? Now I know what the heck they are doing, and it makes a little more sense. But I think the thing that most shocked me is how much influence these young 20-somethings have in writing these bills, in writing the OMB presidential budget for our agencies. I mean, the one that does the NASA budget, she is young,
Yeah.
very young.
Yeah.
And
It's
yet they're
crazy.
for, billions of dollars in budget writing for the president's budget requests. And that kind of blew me away. I thought it would be like this team of 300 people that have to do these huge giant budgets, and it's not. So I think young people have a lot of opportunity for power in DC.
It's true. It's true. And you look at the budgets that are offered for congressional staff or for the office staff for any of these agencies. I mean, they're strapped. They operate on shoestrings. So you get that. That's what you have, and you have to pay this sort of low, crazy wage. I felt almost bad when I did the Congressional Science Fellowship. I was the AMS UCAR Fellow in 2013, 2014, and my salary was easily double that of most of the other legislative assistants in my office. And, it's just, and they were so incredibly good. They were such experts, and they had such, responsibility. And that was incredibly humbling. But yeah, I had the opportunity when I was a congressional fellow. I was writing legislation. I would get draft points. We'd iron them out in the office, and then I'd be the one talking to Legis Council and ironing out the language. And so they have the Library of Congress has an arm that has people who actually translate everything into legalese that makes it impossible to read, normal humans. But it's people who can go back to all those books of legal code and say, okay, here's where these things fit. And thank God, because it is so incredibly complicated. But yeah, that's exactly what happens. And it is just the first time that you experience something like that, you think, wow, this is how this works. So yeah, I'm just thrilled that you had such a great time, and it was clear that every day was this adventure. What was your favorite thing or the most eye-opening of the experiences that you got to have?
Some of our speakers were excellent, but one of them from the State Department talked about world water issues. And how if diplomacy is not working, military action is next. And so diplomacy is on his shoulders. And he talked about, the number of people in our world that 1.5 to 2 million in Africa don't have safe drinking water. In the U.S., 2 billion people lack access to sanitation. Not the U.S. and around the world. 2 billion people lack access to sanitation. And that just puts your brain around that. They don't have a bathroom.
Yeah.
That just kind of blows you away. I know my sons have been to Haiti and Guatemala, and they've seen some of that and told me that. But 2 billion people on this planet. And where are we at? What's the latest number? We're just over 7 billion right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's really hard to hear. So his presentation was excellent. I will say the one that most moved me was a woman from Costa Rica who is now Deputy Director for Earth Systems at NASA and has a $200 billion budget. She was very impressive. I really loved her story. It didn't really tie in much with the policy side of it, but just to see somebody who at 7 years old saw a man walk on the moon and told her mother, I want to do that. Well, she's not doing it, but she's a SESer at NASA. I mean, come on, really? That's pretty very close.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Oh, that's wonderful. Does it make you see your current job in any new light, or at least your future trajectory? What do you think the lasting effects are going to be for you?
I have always been an eager beaver, and I always want to strive to learn more and do more. I don't know that it's going to be earth-shattering in the next 6 months for me, but I'm hoping that opportunities will arise in the next, 1 to 2, 3 year time frame. As much as I love Montana, those temperatures Tony Rice was just talking about on Mars, some of the days we had this winter. And Tony would tweet me and let me know that. So I love Montana. It's a great place, but I know that I want to do more in my career. I don't know what that is yet, though.
Well,
Well,
you
it sounds
yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Bill.
it sounds like one of the things you could do is just print your notes from this colloquium. It may be a good book, Tanya.
That is a great idea. I am not kidding. I bet that would make an amazing story. I bet that you could tell it so colorfully too.
Kim, you keep asking questions because you got us on a good train here.
Oh yeah. So I mean the grand thing about the policy colloquium is that they do shovel so much in such a small time frame, and I have to say it took me. You feel overwhelmed in those 10 days of the colloquium. I did the colloquium. I at least had a primer. And I still, when I got out to DC for the congressional fellowship, I think it took me and all of my cohort, everybody else, 2 months to feel like we could even use words effectively on the Hill. I mean, it is absolutely unbelievable. And I'm curious for the folks in your cohort. Did you feel like that sensation was widely shared with everybody else who was there in your group of policy colloquium folks?
There were some who just took to it very naturally and didn't seem to struggle at all. There was a few of us that a few times our heads were spinning a little bit, and you kind of chat about it out in the hallway during breaks. I think overall, our grad students really saw a lot of opportunity for them in the future. They've been going to school for 6 to 7, 8 years, and there's got to be something beyond that for them. And this opened doors that they didn't know existed. I think for some of us that were seasoned employees, that we called ourselves the mid-career people in the room, that maybe didn't have the master's or the PhD degrees, we were a little struggling on, where do we fit in this? But we did find that there are congressional fellowships for federal employees. So that's something to look into in the future as an opportunity. And I think some of the things we saw in the private sector were very interesting. They can innovate so much quicker than we can in the government. And so for me, I like to see change rapid. And to me, days it's a little slow for what we'd like to do. We talked about the wireless emergency alerts earlier. We've been talking about this for 5 years on tagging them, and it's still not done. So what I'm understanding now is all the policy issues to change those things. It sounds really easy out here to snap a finger and put tags on your wireless emergency alerts, but there's a lot of repercussions in the cell phone industry, in the FCC, and things that need to be addressed first. So I have a better appreciation of why things are slower, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you guys hearing feedback from my mic? Or am I good for you?
Just a tiny bit. The one thing I did kind of that sunk into me is, a lot of people think they're giving feedback on social media, and I really have to tell myself, don't read the comments. What I'm finding, though, is these congressional representatives that serve us and these senators that serve us, they do want to hear what we have to say, and they want to hear our voices. And so sending letters is a good thing. I've always hesitated to do those things. Being a federal employee, I don't want to look as though I'm lobbying, but we learned the difference between analyzing, advocating, and lobbying. And when you see things that should be fixed in our system, we should speak up and say something about it. And I think I was now more encouraged to do that after all the things that we discussed and saw.
That's great. And it might be, do you know if you're able to take advantage of an opportunity the AMS has? I know on an annual basis, they go to the Hill with members and they do informational briefings. And it's a great opportunity for AMS members who are involved in all different kinds of facets of the weather and climate enterprise and water enterprise to go and meet with representatives who might be interested in their issues. Do you think that's something that you could do or might be interested in? I'm not sure if that was discussed at the colloquium explicitly.
It came up a couple of times, and I knew that it happened from past AMS meetings and things. It's something I could look into. I'll be honest, I don't know that I would be the best one to be a advocate because I'm a little bit too passionate on some things. And as much as I've learned to temper that down over the years, it comes out at times.
What? No. And I can't identify with that at all either. Yeah, it can be really, really hard when you feel very strongly. But I think if you return to your example you just gave, you learned about the nuance of something, even something you're so passionate about, and then you start to see the system as a whole. And then I don't know about you, but for me, that helped to temper a lot of my more fiery passions and ambitions. And one of the things that we were taught in our boot camp before thrusting us out to the legislative branch was that there's a reason that things are slow. And that's kind of how the system was designed, to balance one power against one another, and to assure that in the process of trying to make a change, nobody gets overlooked. And it's actually baked very intentionally into our system, and it's so frustrating, but it's also so wonderful. And I think I encourage, as much as you're able and interested, to get more experiences like that and to delve in. Don't be afraid of being too passionate. That energy is what will drive you. And as you dive in, and with the open heart that I know that you have, you will find that they'll be balanced. Just keeping in mind the good of everybody. It comes. It's a lot, and it can feel very daunting, but is also very wonderful. So I know you very well. You're going to keep pushing for whatever opportunities, and I'm very excited for what this could mean for your career, for your future. It changed mine. If I hadn't done the policy colloquium, I never would have known that they had fellowships for the Congressional Science Fellowships. And after my PhD, I don't know what I would have done. But doing that completely changed the trajectory of everything. So I'm so excited that you got the chance to finally take some time for you, get to do some of these things. Pretty wonderful.
Did any of our other folks here do the policy colloquium at all?
Folks in sort of where?
James, or is it Kevin and
No,
Bill?
we haven't. Yeah, that sounds really attractive. Kim, why haven't we had Bill Hook on here, Kim?
You know what? Maybe
He
Tanya.
has best stories.
He does. Maybe Tanya, maybe you can help me, because no one says no to Tanya Franson.
He said no to me enough times. So
yeah,
I can get Bill. We get Bill on there. We'll email him tomorrow, Kim.
Yes, let's do it. Because I tried to email him, and I tried to sort of pry him with a couple different tactics. Like after the National Academy study that he co-chaired, I was like, oh, this will be a great chance for you to come on and to talk about the study and the importance of the social sciences and the policy for social science and blah 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 blah. And I just never heard anything. So
we'll work on it. He actually did bring up WeatherBrains in the group as a great place for people to learn and get more information on the happenings in our enterprise. So he's very aware of it, and he's a fan.
Wow. Well, okay, great. That is good intel.
Well, this show tonight is just a perfect example of that. It's just, listening to our friends, and people are so knowledgeable in every aspect of it. Kim, you bring so much to the table, obviously. Kevin's passions about social media and communication are so critical. And just having Steve and Tanya tonight, just incredible, both on, from a meteorological standpoint and now from policy. I had lost faith in our government 3 or 4 years ago, Kim, when you came on the show. It was probably, I guess, before you were a panelist. And you shared some stories about being in Washington that made me think maybe things are better than what you hear.
Mm.
And Tanya, you've given me a new lease on life tonight, because maybe there is hope.
Write
for
your
what's
letters,
going
Bill.
on behind
Write
it.
your letters.
Do it. They read them. There's someone in the office that reads each and every one, at least from many offices. Do it. It's worth it.
Well, you wanted to get to bed early tonight, Tanya, and we ignited you, and now look what we did. But we're so thankful that you could come on with us tonight and spend some time. Talk about your mentoring aspects of what you're doing over on the AMS side for a minute.
So to me, mentoring is huge. After the Was Is program in 2006 is when we had it 5. I found that mentoring was important, and all the mentoring that we did was informal. I was helping others, they were helping me. Kim is just now encouraging me to do more in my career. She's younger than me, so you can have mentors that are younger. And the best relationship is one where the mentor and the mentee are both gaining something from it. It's not just one-sided. And I've had those experiences through formal Department of Commerce relationships. So when I got elected to the AMS Council, the one thing I ran on my platform, my one election I've ever done, is I felt that there's such great knowledge from the young people we see at the meetings to those who are towards the end of their careers, that we need to connect these people. And these students are just sponges that want somebody to work with them and take an interest in them and help them along. So it took us less than a year. I'm so proud of that. We partnered with AGU, and the program is mentoring365.org. And it's a 12-week program. And when you sign up, if you're an AMS member, you can find mentors through AGU, the Society of Exploration Geophysicists, the Association for Women Geoscientists, and IRIS. And IRIS is about institutions that do research and education in seismology. So I signed up for it because if I'm promoting it and bringing it in, I better darn well participate. And my first mentee is actually a PhD student who does hydrological modeling in Brazil. I thought, how in the heck did he pick me, an operational meteorologist in Montana who has not got a PhD? Turns out he liked that I work with disasters and emergency managers, and he was trying to figure out how to communicate to his users on the Paraguay River in Brazil, which the Paraguay River is huge. It takes 6 months to drain it if it floods on the north side of it. So we've had a lot of fun through that. I have told him over and over that if he needs more help on his research side and publishing, he needs to find another mentor, not me. But the other aspects, so we come up with a few program areas that he wants to work in, and those are the things we're working on. The program's very well structured. You get an email every week. It kind of talks you through developing that relationship. And then it gives you advice and webinars and things throughout the 12 weeks that you can work on. We right now in AMS have about 30 mentors. I'm not happy with that number at all. We need way more. We have like 12,000 members in AMS. I'd like to see at least 10% of those signing up to be mentors. We have also probably at this point about 30 mentees that have signed up as well. So it's an opportunity to grow. I know several of you have been very involved with the National Weather Association. It's no money. All you have to do is sign an MOU and your name gets added to the front page of Mentoring 365. I know NWA serves a lot of meteorologists, especially operational ones. And to me, having a mentor is somebody that can help you grow and gain experience and skills. You want a mentor that's different from you. You don't want somebody that's a lot like you, because you want some feedback and you want to be able to push yourself with boundaries a little bit with a mentoring program. And if it's somebody just like you, you may not get to do that. I'm going to be quiet because I've been talking a lot here. Any questions about the mentoring program?
No, that sounds very exciting. Of course, in the NWA, there's a huge speed mentoring event on Sunday as part of the National Weather Association annual meeting that will be in St. Louis. It will be on Sunday, August 26th. So if you're coming to the annual meeting, reach out to the National Weather Association office in Norman, or to any of us, and we'll hook you up for that day. That event has become really big, Tanya. I'm sure you participated in it before. Kim, have you had a chance to be part of the speed mentoring at NWA?
I did. Of this past year. Yep.
And it is fascinating, and you just at the end you're tired and talked out, but at the same time you feel really good. After you've completed that. So I encourage all the students to be involved in that, encourage all the meteorologists in our profession and other scientists that are involved in the National Weather Association to be a part of that, because they do a fantastic job of pairing the meteorologists and other folks from the weather enterprise with students. And boy, it's just an amazing experience.
One of the things we work on with our employees is performance, image, and exposure. And performance is basically something the employee has to do. They've got to work on that and get that to 100%. Image and exposure, though, those are things that your supervisors and your mentors help you with. And if it weren't for the mentors I've had in my career, and I would start naming names, but I would forget somebody and I'd feel awful. But Eve Gruntfest and Vicki Nadolski, and it's not Nadolski anymore, but Bill Hook for sure, and Gina and Kim. And there's so many people who have helped me with image and exposure. And without that, I would never have been elected into the council of the AMS. I was kind of this unknown person in the Weather Service. And when you start networking and working with people and gaining that exposure, it gives you doors, it opens opportunities up to do things. So without mentoring, that would never have happened.
That is very exciting. Well, it's probably a good time to start picks of the week. Tanya, do you want to use your Mentoring 365 as your pick of the week, or do you have another one you'd like to share with us?
I'd like to use the one of our AMS policy colloquium group at Mount Vernon. So, yeah, do you want me to send it to you?
Yeah, if you don't mind, we'll put it on the website and all that. Okay. And how can folks get in touch with you, Tanya?
I am Pura Vida WX on Twitter. I am on Facebook, Tanya Franson, and it's TANJA. Not many of us, there's a few, but you probably have friends in common with me. And Tanya.Franson at NOAA.gov, TANJA.FRANSEN@NOAA.gov. And you know how to get hold of me. Kim knows how to get hold of me. I think, I'm not hard to find.
No, and always fascinating. Thank you so much for jumping in here at the last minute with us when we had a quick schedule change, Tanya.
Well, I appreciate it. I've gained a lot out of this. Tony Rice and I are friends because of WeatherBrains, because we were on at the same time one time.
Oh, that's just awesome. Tony is a social person too, and he'll be at the National Weather Association annual meeting. He'll be there at our Weather Fest on that Saturday, August 25th, which just is exploding and getting bigger and bigger and going to be a really huge event. So we're excited about Weather Ready Fest, August 25th. People are already picking up the free timed tickets, even though we haven't promoted it. So I'm not sure how the word is getting out, but if you got a chance, maybe because I talked about it on WeatherBrains last week, so maybe that was it. But go to weatherreadyfest.com if you're anywhere in eastern Missouri, Illinois, anywhere in the Midwest, and that you want to make a weekend of it. Come on down, and it's a great time to register for NWA while we're still in the early bird time. So save a little bit of money, go ahead and get registered, and come on to St. Louis. So Kim, what's your pick of the week?
My pick of the week, it sort of picks up from the topic that James brought up at the beginning of our show. I have the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety Guidance and Inspection Checklist for HUD code manufactured homes and mobile homes. And I picked this because there's been a discussion this week following some promotional materials that were put out by especially the Alabama Manufactured Housing Association. It stirred up a really great conversation about What do we know about how safe those structures are? And what is recommended if you live in that kind of a structure? An increasing fraction of the US population does live in those structures, especially in places where they do experience tornadoes, and so there's a physical vulnerability. So it's very important to understand all the nuances of all of that. So I've attached the checklist, and the overarching recommendation, it's important to point out from this group, is that those are maybe not structures where you want to be during a tornado. So the continuing recommendation for them and for many folks in other organizations is, if the tornado might be possible, think about putting yourself in another place. So I want to just put that out there.
So are you seeing increasing evidence of lobbying by this and other similar organizations to affect, the discussion about safety and mitigation and things like that? Kim, I'm seeing some signs that that's much more active than I ever saw it before.
It seems so. It seems like it's very active. And I have to admit, something I've learned out of all of it, I was not aware of the intricate differences between mobile homes and manufactured homes. And I'm even on a research project through the Vortex Southeast funding opportunity, where we're studying perceptions of risk for populations who live in what we called mobile homes. Our whole title involves mobile homes, and I'll be looking at the integrated warning team and how they message to mobile home residents, and have programs designed to help these people. And we were not differentiating very specifically manufactured housing. So I think this has been an educational bit for me, and it's important for me to be as aware as I can be, and all of us to be as aware as we can be. So there has been an important part of this that I think has done some real good in building societal awareness of the different kinds of structures that are out there. I do want to be mindful as the conversation continues that we really do understand in practice how these structures are put in place. And that apparently has everything to do with how safe they are, if they're really well tied down or not. And so the manufactured housing associations are pushing the sort of perspective, well, if they are properly tied down, then they're largely, there's some benefit to that. The question is, if you're a homeowner, do you know if it is or not? So I think really interesting questions arising. I never am down on anyone for doing an educational campaign that brings awareness. I think we've started some great conversations, and it's a very important one. And I really hope that at the end of it, everyone can agree on a messaging strategy that's best for the people who live in those homes.
Exactly. Kevin, can you talk? Or are you quiet? Can't talk. Well, Kevin just put in our chat. He said, "Y'all are still talking. It's Saturday already." So I told him, yeah, it's two shows in one. Remember, Certs? This is WeatherBrains is the Certs of podcasts now. We give 2 shows in one. This was supposed to be a slow show. This is going to be the one, where you get in, get out. I told Tanya and Steve it was informal, just us chatting. And look, we almost waited around long enough for James to come back. So I doubt Kevin can give us his pick of the week, but we'll have it on the website. Thumbs down. That's the operative word. So before James gets back, I'll go ahead and shut us down. Kim, anything else to add?
No, I think this is a wonderful discussion on all fronts. Thanks so much, Bill.
It was. Tanya, thank you for staying up late. Anything else you want to add?
No, I appreciate it. And, have me back to WeatherBrains more often. This is always fun.
There's always a permanent panelist with your name on it, Tanya. So you just say the word.
All right.
But for James and Kevin, Kim, and everyone else who couldn't be with us tonight, I'm Bill Murray. WeatherBrains is the weekly netcast. It's all about weather. We do this generally on Monday nights, except Thursday nights during vacation season. We'll be back with a show 10 days from now on what, Kim, will that be? That'll be 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 27th, maybe?
25th?
And I think
25th?
25th. Okay, I can't count. And you've got a say in that show that night. A little tease again. I think you've gotten to tease it the last couple of weeks.
I have. Excited to do so again. We'll be talking with 2 gentlemen who come from very different walks of life. One came from an engineering background, one from developing a very popular winery, and they somehow magically come together in the land of Disney to create one of the most successful public awareness campaigns for weather safety that may have existed really outside of huge programs like the Weather Service runs, but just a tremendous effort that has proven results, and very excited to talk with them and share their incredible life stories and the story of that program.
Well, until we get together to talk with Kim's folks on the 25th, ostensibly, this is a good time to wrap the show before James gets back and fusses at us, because we almost broke a record tonight. But until the 25th, when we get back together with you, I'm Bill Murray saying have a great week and see you then.
Bye.
All right. Thank y'all all for staying up late. Thank you so much, Tanya. It meant the world for you to jump in there. Appreciate it. Kim, thank you for all the great input.
Absolutely.
Kevin, always.
Night,
Always
guys.
the best. Thank you, guys. I got to have my whole dinner while we were right here eating at the office. So I'll sign off now.
Wow, they just got finished over here. I think that was a record length for a WeatherBrains. That was good stuff. But thanks to Steve and Tanya for coming on. Can't wait to hear the audio version since I had to skip out and do some television. But yeah, we're again, the deal is I'm off next week, and we try and do a show every week. In fact, I think we have been successful. I think for 12 years, we've not missed 1 week of doing one of these shows. So this is the one that'll be posted on the podcast side Monday night of next week. But obviously, we're live on the YouTubers now. Song of the night is over, so we finished with that, and I got one more day, and I'll take a break. You know, the hardest part of the year for me, it's the 1st of January when school starts back through mid-June. During most of those months, I am doing 16-hour days, 2 school programs a day, radio, television, commercial radio. The social media is the 800-pound gorilla that nobody knows what to do with, but to be successful, you need to deal with it. And sometimes you just need little breaks. So I'm looking forward to that. Again, we're coming to Denver. If you're in Denver, Colorado, look out. We'll be there Monday. And again, I'll be in Atlanta this weekend. The Emmy thing, I'm not a TV guy. I would much prefer to go to an American Meteorological Society meeting, National Weather Association meeting. Those are my people. Especially those NWA meetings are the greatest, just like a family reunion. But I just think you ought to go once. So I'll get my little tuxedo, and my wife's going to get all spiffied up, and we'll go over there, which is Saturday night up in Buckhead somewhere. I've not even looked at the details on it. I've done a couple of those things. I went to one Gold Circle induction ceremony. For those that get in the Gold Circle, you have to be in broadcasting for 50 years. And Dave Baird, our news anchor here, was inducted into that a couple of years ago. Dave's retired now. And then I went to a Silver Circle induction ceremony in which I was inducted. That's 25 years in broadcasting. I was inducted with Cantori that night. The Weather Channel. So we had a lot of fun with that, but that's not your standard Emmy Awards deal. The Emmy Awards is always in June, but there's 1 million people and everybody's all dressed up. And we're going. We're going to do it one time, probably the last time. All right. Thank you guys for watching. We will be back on, Monday, June 25th. At 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern. So we'll see you guys then. Thank you all for watching. God bless. Have a great week. Bye-bye.